Hello everyone, welcome to lesson 113, day 2. We're going to be talking about linear representations today. Kind of a shift of pace from what we've been talking about the last couple of days. Our goals today are to review slope-intercept form of a line. We're also going to talk about how to find slope in the y-intercept, and we're going to be able to construct a table, graph, and an equation from a linear scenario. All right, so we'll kind of get started here. Looking at this situation, we have Marlon who is saving money from his new job. He starts his savings account with $25, and each week he plans to put in $20. Okay, so we want to start off by creating a table to represent this situation. So we want to represent the amount of money he has in his savings account at the end of each week. And it specifically says that we want to start with week 0 and go for 5 weeks, right? So week 0 is what we call the initial money, right? So how much money does he start his savings account with? Well, it tells us that right here, it's $25. So I'm going to label my table here. I'm going to say this first row is where I'm going to put my x values, and this second row is where I'm going to put my y values, which is also the same thing as f of x, right? So y and f of x are equivalent. So you can put either one in there. I really don't, I don't care at this point, but just know that on MyOpenMath, they might use either one. Okay, so we're going to let x represent the weeks, and we'll let y or f of x represent how much money we have. All right, so now I've got all the variables defined. I've got my table set up. So we're going to say in week 0, right, before he starts working, he's going to start his savings account with $25. So we've got 0 and 25. And we're going to go for 5 weeks. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? So there's our 5 weeks that we're going to go. And it says that each week he plans to put in $20. So he's taking $20 from his paycheck and he's putting it into the savings account. So after he works 1 week, he takes $20 and he puts it in the savings account. But he had 25 in there from the week before. So if we do 25 plus 20, we're going to get $45 here. And then each week he adds 20 more. So this will be 65 here after week 2. And then 20 more would give us 85 after week 3. And then 105. And then 125 at the end of week 5. Okay, so now we have a table, and a table is valuable because the next representation that we want to build here is our graph. And having a whole bunch of points that we can plot helps us build our graph. So I'm going to go down here now. This is just a blank graph. There's nothing on it. So we have to kind of set it up here. So this is, I'm going to let the x-axis be down here at the very bottom, and the y-axis will be here on the very left. So I'm just going to label that real quick. I'm going to call this x, and I'll call this up here y. So this will be our origin at 0, 0. Okay, so I'm going to say this is 0. And then since the weeks are going to be represented down here, I only need to go 5 weeks. So I'm going to go every 2 boxes, and I'm going to say there's 1 week. And then 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, and 5 weeks, and I'll label that as weeks. That way, if someone were reading my graph, they would know what these numbers represent down here. They know that these are the x values, and that represents weeks. Now remember, the y value represents money, and so I'm going to label that over here. We'll say money, and then we need to be able to get up to 125 if I want to fit all of my points on here. Okay, so I could go up, I don't have to go up by 1s, I could go up by 5s, 10s, 15s, 20s, whatever I need to make sure that I can get up to 125. So I'm going to go up by 10s. I think if I make each box worth 10 here, I should be able to get up to what I need to for the 125. So we'll just make some tick marks here real quick. And we'll go up by 10s. So 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90, 100, 110, sloppy, 120, and 130. 30. And I really don't need to go any higher because I stopped my table there at the 125. Okay, I'm going to grab a different color here. Let's go with green. And we're going to start plotting the points on our table, right? So at week 0, we had $25. So that'll be here in between the 25 and the 30, right? So I'm going to put a point there. And then we're at 1 and 45. So that'll be about right here. Again, in between those boxes, not a problem. And then 2 and 65. And then 3 and 85. I know it's kind of boring watching me plot points, but this is all part of it. This is part of building a graph. There we go. And then we've got 5 and 125, which will be up here. And as we start plotting those points, you start to see our line form. And that's what I'm going to do next. I'm going to go ahead and draw my line through those points. There we go. It drew an extra line for me, but let's see if I can get rid of that. Yeah, there we go. So there's my line. Notice I put an arrow on the end to indicate that the line would keep on going. For as long as Marlin decides to work, this line will keep growing at the same rate, so it'll keep going off in that same direction. Okay, so I did scale and label my axes appropriately. You can see here my labels, and my scale is consistent. I've got it labeled with money in weeks, X and Y, so we're all good. So now we've got our table, we've got our graph, and now the next thing that they want to know about is our linear equation. All right, so you have to think back to Algebra 1 when we learned about lines. The equations for lines, there was a very famous form of a line that we learned about, and it was y equals mx plus b. And this is what they call slope-intercept form. All right, so if you forgot about this, you might recall that m represents the slope of the line and b represents the y-intercept. So when we talk about slope, we talk about rate of change, right, is another way to describe that, or the steepness of the line. And the y-intercept is also referred to as the initial value. All right, so these are all ways to think about those two different parts. So to find our slope, there's a couple of ways that we can do that. And I'm going to go back up to the table right here, and you can essentially pick any 2 points from this table to calculate the slope. All right, so I'm going to pick these 2 points right here, and like I said, you can pick any 2 points that you want. You're going to get the same slope no matter what 2 points you pick. So I'm just going to pick those two right next to each other. All right, and if you recall, slope is simply rise over run, right? So how much do we go up or down, and how much do we go left or right? Okay, so to calculate rise, we need to take our two y values right here, the 65 and the 45, and subtract them. Okay, and then for our run, we need to take our two x values and subtract those in the same order. So notice how I went 65 minus 45, so I need to do 2 minus 1. And then we just calculate, right? So 65 minus 45 is 20, 2 minus 1 is 1, and 20 divided by 1, you can leave it like that, or you can just simply write 20. Okay, so my slope is 20. So I'm going to say y equals 20x. And then I got to figure out my initial value, my y-intercept, whatever you want to call it. So I'm going to go to my graph that I just built, and I can see my y-intercept is right here at 0, 25. Okay, so the b value is the y-coordinate of that y-intercept. All right, so I can say 20x plus 25. Another way to find it is to read the scenario, because it represents our initial value. So it represents the initial amount of money that he started with. And if you recall, he started his savings account with $25. Okay. The other way you can find it is in the table, right? The y-intercept always occurs whenever x equals 0. So you can see it right there as well. Okay. And that actually completes our equation. That is our equation that represents the growing amount of money that he has in his account. And just want to quickly note that another way we could write this, instead of saying y, we could say f of x equals 20x plus 25. Right? So if you were to give me the number of weeks that he worked, I could calculate how much money he has in his account. All right, well, last thing I want to talk about is just another way to find the slope. And I'm going to grab a different color here. Let's go with red. And again, you can pick any 2 points here. So I'm going to pick these 2 points right here on my line. So we're going to find the slope graphically here by drawing in something called a slope triangle. So I'm going to draw in the run, right, which is where we just go straight over. Right, so that's our run. And then our rise is straight up and down. So it creates this thing called a slope triangle. Okay, and if I look at the length of this side of the triangle, I went from 2 to 3, so that has a length of 1. And if I look at this length going up and down, I went from 65 up to 85, so that has a length of 20. So you can see my rise is 20, my run is 1, and I could just skip over to this part and just say 20 over 1 rather than having to do this calculation. So either way you want to find the slope is fine with me. So you can calculate it using that slope triangle, or you can calculate it by grabbing a couple of points off of the table. All right. Okay, guys, that should be a good recap. I think we know how to build the graph. We know how to build the equation. We know how to find the slope and the y-intercept in multiple ways. So make sure you do review this video a couple of times and do the practice problem, because this will pop up on the quiz tomorrow. All right, guys, last thing here, just there's a quick recap. This is a math notes box from our original textbook, so you can also review that to help you out. All right, guys, have a great day.